Alpha King paid for practical wife, but found woman who made him smile through chaos. The wind howled through the high towers of Arendor, carrying with it a chill that seemed older than the kingdom itself. Snowflakes, sharp and cold, swirled around the obsidian walls, reflecting the pale light of a silver moon. Inside the grand palace, corridors stretched endlessly, lined with tapestries that whispered of forgotten kings and lost battles. In the heart of it all sat King Thalric, the ruler of Arendor, a man whose reputation was as iron-bound as the crown on his head. His eyes, stormy and unyielding, had seen too much: wars, betrayals, and loss. Few dared to approach him, and even fewer understood him. Yet, on this bitter winter morning, Thalric faced a new kind of challenge, a challenge not born of war, but of duty. The kingdom demanded an alliance, a union to strengthen ties with the neighboring land of Valamire. For this, a bride had been chosen, a woman of sharp mind and quiet strength, trained to survive in courts as treacherous as the wilderness. Her name was Lysandra. She arrived at the palace gates with a small retinue, her horse shivering beneath the weight of frost. She wore no jewelry, no extravagant robes, only the practical garments of a woman used to walking through forests and negotiating with men who valued power above kindness. Her hair, dark as the winter night, framed a face both serious and thoughtful. Her eyes, though cautious, flickered with curiosity as she took in the palace, its shadows, and its secrets. Lysandra knew she was entering a dangerous game. She had been told of Thalric's reputation, a king whose anger could shatter walls, whose decisions could doom kingdoms. And yet, there was a spark of hope in her heart, quiet and stubborn, that perhaps she could find more than duty in this arrangement. Perhaps she could find understanding. The first meeting was brief and formal. Thalric sat upon the high throne, his posture rigid, his gaze piercing. Lysandra bowed deeply, keeping her eyes lowered, yet she felt the weight of his presence, even as she fought to keep her composure. The courtiers whispered their words like feathers brushing against steel. "Lysandra of Valamire," Thalric said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "You come to Arendor not for love, but for alliance. Let it be known that I do not seek affection, nor should you." Her voice carried no fear, only clarity. "I come to fulfill my duty, as does my family." A silence stretched between them, a tension that seemed almost alive. Thalric studied her, noting the way she held herself, the subtle steadiness in her hands, the quiet fire in her eyes. It was rare for someone to meet his gaze without flinching. Something in her presence stirred an unexpected warmth, a flicker of curiosity in a heart long closed to companionship. In the days that followed, Lysandra settled into the palace, learning its rhythms and rules. She studied the court, its politics, and its dangers with care, never allowing herself to appear weak. Thalric observed her from afar, noting how she navigated the palace with a grace that seemed effortless, yet precise. She spoke little, but when she did, her words were sharp and thoughtful. For the first time in many years, Thalric found himself listening, truly listening, to another person. Yet the palace was not kind. Shadows moved where no one expected them, and whispers of curses long dormant filled the halls. It was said that the bloodline of Arendor carried a shadow, a curse that could awaken when least expected. Thalric had learned to live with it, though it haunted his dreams. And now, with Lysandra in the palace, he felt the stirrings of something new, a fear that perhaps this curse could touch her too. One evening, As the sky bled gold and purple with sunset, Lysandra found herself wandering the palace gardens. The winter air bit at her cheeks, and snow crunched beneath her boots. She paused by a fountain frozen in time, its surface solid and glimmering. She had come seeking quiet, a moment away from the endless expectations of court life. Thalric appeared without warning, stepping from the shadows. He was taller than most men, his presence commanding, yet there was a softness in his eyes that few had seen. He did not speak at first, merely watching her. "You wander far for a woman who is meant to obey," he said, his voice carrying no anger, only curiosity. "I obey when it serves purpose," Lysandra replied calmly. "I am no one's pawn, Your Majesty." Thalric's lips twitched almost imperceptibly, and he took a step closer. "A pawn can still be dangerous," he said, "especially one who knows the game better than the player." They stood in silence, watching the frozen fountain. The air was heavy with unspoken words, a quiet tension that seemed to draw them together even as it warned them apart. Lysandra felt her heart quicken, a strange flutter she had not expected. Thalric, for his part, felt a warmth he had not allowed himself to feel in years, a flicker of something he dared not name. Days turned into weeks, and the strange rhythm of their relationship unfolded. Thalric continued to rule with an iron hand, yet Lysandra's presence softened the edges of his world. She challenged him subtly, questioning decisions, offering insights that even his counselors overlooked. And he, in turn, began to see the man he had once been, a man capable of more than fear and control. One night, as snow fell thickly outside the palace windows, Lysandra was summoned to Thalric's chamber. She entered quietly, bowing her head in respect. He was seated by the hearth, the fire casting flickering shadows across his stern face. "You do not fear this palace," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Most would tremble at every shadow." "I have learned that fear is wasted on walls and whispers," she replied. "The true danger lies in underestimating those around you." Thalric studied her, a long, measured look that seemed to peer into her very soul. "And you believe you can survive me?" he asked, his tone half challenge, half amusement. "I do not seek to survive, Your Majesty," she said softly. "I seek to understand, and perhaps to be understood in return." For a moment, the room was silent, except for the crackling of the fire. Thalric felt a strange pull in his chest, a longing he had buried beneath years of duty and grief. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance between them, yet he hesitated, afraid of what the feeling might bring. Outside, the storm grew wilder, the wind rattling the windows as if the kingdom itself were holding its breath. Lysandra left the chamber that night with a quiet sense of victory, not over Thalric, but over her own fears. She had glimpsed the man behind the crown, and it was more terrifying and more beautiful than she could have imagined. The next morning, the palace awoke to a strange calm. Snow blanketed the courtyards, muffling sound and movement. Thalric walked through the halls, his thoughts consumed by Lysandra's words, her gaze, the subtle power she wielded simply by existing. He was a king, yet she made him feel like something less rigid, something more human. It was in the courtyard, under the pale morning sun, that the first unspoken bond began to take shape. Lysandra tended to the horses, her movements precise and graceful. Thalric approached, his steps measured, eyes on her with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. "You make this chaos seem Manageable, he said finally, his voice soft, uncharacteristically so. I make what must be done. Manageable, she corrected gently. I do not pretend the world is less dangerous than it is. Only less lonely. Her words struck a chord deep within him, and for the first time Thalric wondered if there was a life beyond the crown, beyond the curse, beyond the constant weight of expectation. He wanted her to stay, not because she was required to, but because he wanted her to, and the realization terrified him. That evening, as the palace lay quiet and the storm raged on outside, Thalric found himself in the moonlit courtyard, staring at the shadows. He whispered a name into the wind, a name that had not been spoken in years, and Lysandra appeared at the edge of the garden, watching him silently. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat the world seemed to pause. The snow fell around them like a soft curtain, muffling the world beyond. Thalric felt something fragile and powerful stir within him, a connection he had long thought impossible. And yet, in that moment, a cold realization struck him. The bond he felt could bring both warmth and danger, and he could not yet choose which would triumph. The wind howled once more through the towers, and snowflakes danced like silent heralds of fate. Thalric and Lysandra stood there, apart yet together, aware that something had begun. A dangerous, beautiful thread weaving their lives together in ways neither could fully understand. And as the moonlight bathed them in silver, both knew that their lives and the kingdom of Arendor would never be the same again. The palace of Arendor was quieter than usual that morning, though an unusual tension hung in the air. Snow still blanketed the courtyards, but the wind carried more than cold. It carried whispers, faint murmurs of something old and unsettled. The servants moved quickly, their eyes darting to the corridors as if shadows themselves might reach out and snatch them away. Lysandra walked along the northern gallery, her hands clasped behind her back, her breath forming small clouds in the icy air. She had grown used to the weight of palace life, the sharp eyes and hushed voices, but lately, a strange unease gnawed at her. She could feel it in the walls, in the chill that no fire could fully chase away, and in the way the snow seemed to settle heavier over certain parts of the palace grounds. King Thalric entered the gallery without knocking. His cloak, black as a raven's wing, trailed silently behind him. He moved with the careful control of a predator, his sharp eyes scanning everything, yet always returning to her. "You notice it, don't you?" he asked, his voice low. "I notice the silence," Lysandra replied evenly, though her heart had begun to beat faster. "And the way the wind seems angry, as if it carries messages it does not dare speak aloud." Thalric frowned, and for the first time, the shadows beneath his eyes seemed darker than usual. "It is more than wind," he said. "Something is stirring in the old places, places where light fears to enter. My ancestors' blood is not free of it. A shadow lingers, one that has waited a long time to awaken." She had learned quickly that Thalric did not speak lightly of matters that were not urgent. "A curse?" she asked carefully. "Or something else?" "Both," he said, his gaze distant. "An old spirit, bound to this bloodline. It waits, patient, silent. And now It moves. Her chest tightened. She had expected challenges in this palace from politics and pride, but not this. She looked at him and saw the man beneath the king, the man who carried grief like a heavy cloak. The thought of this shadow reaching into their lives brought a flicker of fear, but also something unexpected, a need to protect, not just for duty, but for him. For the next several days, the palace seemed to change. Shadows lengthened in the hallways, and the firelight flickered in ways that suggested a presence just beyond sight. Lysandra felt it most in the library, where the oldest texts were kept. She often found herself drawn there, as though something invisible guided her steps. And it was there that she discovered the first clue, a scroll hidden beneath dust and cobwebs, detailing the curse that had plagued the royal bloodline for generations. Thalric entered the library one evening, moving as quietly as a ghost. He found her hunched over the scroll, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face. "You have found it," he said, not accusing, but with a note of relief. "Yes," she replied. "It is complicated. The curse is tied to the heart, not just the throne. It awakens when bloodline and emotion collide. If left unchecked," she paused, swallowing hard, "it could consume the king himself, or anyone he holds dear." Thalric's jaw tightened. "Then you understand why you must be careful around me. Your presence, your feelings, could awaken it faster than I could stop it." Lysandra looked up at him, meeting his stormy eyes. "And yet, here I am," she said softly. "Do you trust me to stand beside you, even if it is dangerous?" He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "I do," he said, though a shadow of doubt lingered. As the days passed, the strange tension between them grew. They worked together to uncover the mysteries of the curse, and in doing so, discovered a rhythm neither had expected. Lysandra's calm intelligence and careful planning impressed Thalric, and he began to rely on her not only as an ally, but as a presence that eased the weight of his crown. He found himself noticing her small gestures, the way she brushed snow from her cloak, the way her voice carried even in quiet rooms, the way her eyes lingered on details others overlooked. He wanted to reach out, to let her know that beneath his stern exterior was a man capable of more than command and control. But fear of the curse and of his own emotions kept his hands at his sides. Lysandra, too, found herself drawn to him. She saw beyond the armor of the king, glimpsing the man who laughed softly at nothing, who sometimes stared at the stars as though searching for lost memories. She felt a protective warmth for him, a need to stand beside him even if it meant facing the shadow that threatened to consume them both. One night during a particularly fierce snowstorm, Thalric summoned her to the eastern tower. The wind rattled the windows, and the torches flickered wildly as though the storm outside had entered the castle itself. "You will not leave this tower tonight," he said, his voice low and commanding.
"I was not planning to," Lysandra replied. Though her pulse quickened,
The storm outside mirrored the storm inside her chest. Thalric paced the room, his hands clasped behind him. The spirit grows stronger. It feeds on fear, doubt, and on the heart of the one it seeks to claim. I have seen it in dreams, and I have felt it in the halls. It knows you are here, Lysandra. It senses the bond forming between us. She swallowed hard. Then we must be careful, she said. But we cannot let fear rule us. Not now, not ever. If we are cautious, if we are clever, we can survive it. Thalric stopped pacing and turned to her, his eyes softening. You are braver than most, he admitted. Braver than I ever expected anyone to be. For a long moment they stood together in silence, the wind howling around them, the snow lashing against the windows. And yet, in that shared quiet, a strange warmth grew, a fragile bond that neither the storm nor the shadow could fully destroy. The next morning the palace was quiet again, but the storm had left its mark. Snowdrifts blocked the smaller gates, and the courtyards were eerily still. Lysandra walked to the stables to check on the horses, her breath misting in the cold air. She felt a presence behind her and turned to see Thalric approaching, his hands tucked into his cloak, his expression unreadable. I will show you something, he said, his voice almost a whisper. He led her through the palace, past corridors lined with tapestries and statues of long-dead kings, until they reached a hidden balcony overlooking the northern forests. Look, he said, pointing toward the horizon. Beyond the castle walls, the snow-covered forest stretched endlessly. In the distance, a pale light shimmered, moving with deliberate grace. Lysandra squinted, and her heart skipped a beat. The light seemed alive, pulsating with an energy that both fascinated and terrified her. That is the spirit, Thalric said quietly. It waits there, just beyond our reach. It knows we are aware of it, and it watches us. Always. Lysandra shivered. Not entirely from the cold. And it will come for us if we are careless. Yes, he said. If we falter, if we hesitate, it will take what it wants. And I fear... His voice trailed off. He looked at her, his stormy eyes filled with something he rarely allowed anyone to see. Fear, yes, but also hope. I fear it may want more than my life. She reached out, brushing a lock of hair from her face, and hesitated before placing a hand on his arm. Then we face it together, she said softly. Not because it is easy, but because it is the right thing to do. You do not have to face this alone. Thalric's eyes softened, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine, unguarded emotion crossed his face. You are not like anyone I have ever known, he murmured. Their bond deepened in the days that followed. They shared quiet moments in the library, studied old texts together, and patrolled the palace corridors late at night, ensuring that no hidden threat could take them unprepared. Thalric began to smile more often, small, fleeting smiles that startled him as much as they comforted her. Lysandra, in turn, found herself smiling back, drawn to the man behind the crown and the shadow. And yet, the shadow waited, patient and silent, feeding on the tension between duty and desire, on the bond that grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, Lysandra wandered through the palace gardens alone, the snow crunching beneath her boots. A faint glow appeared among the trees, soft and inviting. She approached cautiously, her heart pounding. A single blossom, white as moonlight, bloomed from the snow. She reached out and touched it, and a shiver ran through her. The petals quivered, and in the quiet air, she heard it. A whisper of a name. Thalric. Her eyes widened. The blossom trembled in her hands, as though alive, as though it carried a message from the shadow itself. And far away in the palace, Thalric felt a sudden chill run through him, a warning that the spirit had noticed their bond. The curse was awakening, and nothing would ever be the same. The palace of Arindor had never felt more like a cage. The snowstorms had passed, leaving the grounds blanketed in silence. Yet inside, the tension was alive, buzzing through the hallways like an invisible current. Shadows lingered where sunlight could not reach, and the whispering corridors seemed to breathe in secrets. King Thalric moved through the throne room with careful precision. He had spent days in councils and meetings, uncovering the first signs of betrayal. One of his closest advisors, a man he had trusted for decades, had begun to maneuver in secret, aligning with neighboring lords eager to claim the throne if Thalric faltered. Lysandra watched him from the library balcony, her hands clasped in front of her chest. Her heart ached at the weight he bore alone, though she knew he carried it because he felt he must. Every day, she saw the tension in his jaw, the weight of the crown pressing on his shoulders, the burden of a legacy he could not abandon. "I will not let them take the kingdom," Thalric said, his voice low and resolute, almost a whisper meant only for her. "You don't have to face it alone," she replied. "You have me, and I will stand beside you no matter what comes." Instead, he studied her, his stormy eyes softening. "You are brave," he said, almost reluctantly. "Braver than anyone else I have known. But bravery alone will not protect us. It never has." "Then we will be clever," Lysandra said. "Together." Over the next few days, Lysandra and Thalric worked tirelessly to uncover the conspiracies swirling in the court. They read ancient scrolls, studied old letters, and followed trails that others had overlooked. The palace became their shared world, where whispers of betrayal mixed with the quiet rhythm of a growing bond. Yet, even in the midst of strategy and planning, the shadow lingered. It had not forgotten them. Every night, Thalric felt it stir in the corridors, a presence that watched and waited. He tried to shield Lysandra from it, but he realized that the curse did not care for caution. It fed on the closeness forming between them, on the trust and unspoken affection that blossomed in stolen moments. One evening, as twilight fell over the palace, Lysandra found herself alone in the garden once more. The snow crunched softly under her boots as she walked among the trees, her thoughts heavy. She had noticed subtle changes in Thalric's behavior, small smiles that flickered too quickly, moments of hesitation where he seemed almost human, and then she saw it. A figure standing just beyond the edge of the garden, cloaked in shadows. Her heart skipped a beat, but she did not run. She had learned courage not only from training, but from necessity. "Who's there?" she called softly, her voice steady. The figure did not move. Then, in a sudden swirl of wind, it vanished, leaving only a faint shimmer in the snow. Lysandra's pulse raced. The curse was closer than ever, feeding on their presence, testing them. The next day, Thalric summoned her to the throne room. His expression was grave, the storm from the night before reflected in his eyes. "The spirit is growing bolder," he said. "It is no longer content to watch. Soon it will try to strike, and if it does—" His voice faltered for the first time, a rare crack in his armor. "I cannot guarantee what will happen." Lysandra stepped closer. "Then we must act before it can," she said. We must not let it find a way to use fear against us. They began to prepare for the confrontation. Lysandra's cleverness and calm reasoning balanced Thalric's strength and authority. They moved as a team, a silent understanding forming between them. Each strategy session, each patrol through the halls, strengthened their connection. They no longer needed words to communicate. A glance, a gesture was enough. And yet, the court itself was fracturing. Some lords whispered against Thalric openly, questioning his decisions, while others hid their discontent behind forced smiles. Thalric felt the weight of every betrayal, but he could not let fear dictate his actions. He had to act, and he had to act wisely. One afternoon, Lysandra found a secret passage beneath the palace library. It led to a chamber long forgotten, filled with ancient relics and symbols etched in stone. In the center of the room lay a crystal, glowing faintly with a cold silver light. This must be part of the curse, she said softly, touching the smooth surface. The crystal pulsed beneath her fingers, almost as if it were alive. It is a key. If we can understand it, perhaps we can control what comes next. Thalric joined her, placing his hand lightly over hers. Their warmth mingled a small flame against the cold presence of the crystal. We face this together, he said, his voice firm. Whatever it asks of us, we face it as one. The bond between them deepened, stronger than either had expected. Their shared purpose, their reliance on one another, began to break the walls they had built around themselves. Thalric allowed himself to smile at her, small and fleeting, but genuine. Lysandra felt a warmth spread through her chest at the sight, a feeling she had not allowed herself to name. But the shadow waited, patient and relentless. That night, the palace was quiet, the hallways empty except for the soft creak of doors. Lysandra moved through the corridors, checking the crystal in the secret chamber. As she returned to her chambers, she sensed something behind her. A cold breeze whispered past her, carrying a faint, mocking laugh. She froze. The air felt heavy, charged with something unseen. The spirit had followed them, learning, waiting for the right moment. She ran to Thalric's chambers, her heart pounding. "The spirit!" she gasped. "It is stronger. It knows. It is watching us." Waiting. He rose from his chair, his hands clenched. "Then we have no time left," he said. "We must confront it. Tonight." Together they moved to the throne room, where the ancient crystals of the palace glimmered in the torchlight. The shadows deepened, stretching along the walls like living things. The temperature dropped, and the torches flickered as if struggling against the darkness. The spirit appeared at last, a figure cloaked in silver mist, its presence cold and commanding. It spoke in a voice that echoed through the chamber, hollow and ancient. "You dare awaken me," it said. "You dare bind your hearts together, knowing the cost. Do you not fear what I can take?" Thalric stepped forward, placing himself between Lysandra and the figure. "We do not fear you," he said, his voice strong. "We will not allow you to harm those we care for." The spirit laughed, a sound like ice cracking. "Foolish mortal. Your hearts are weak. Your bond is fragile. One misstep, and all will be lost." Lysandra took a deep breath, stepping forward beside him. "Our bond is stronger than fear," she said. "We face this together. We will not falter." The spirit's form flickered, and the shadows shifted, testing their courage. Falric felt the familiar pull of fear, the weight of the curse pressing against his heart. Yet Lysandra's hand found his, and in that touch he found strength. They stood as one, hearts aligned, ready to face the unknown. And then the chamber shifted. The torches dimmed, the crystals pulsed with cold light, and the spirit's eyes, bright as ice, locked onto them. The air hummed with energy, a warning that the next moment would decide everything. The throne room of Arendor was a place of echoes. Its walls had seen centuries of kings and queens, of power gained and lost, of promises broken and kept. Tonight, it would witness something different, something born of courage, trust, and the quiet strength of two hearts bound together. Thalric stood at the center, his cloak a shadow behind him. The torches flickered wildly as if dancing to a song only the spirits of the palace could hear. Beside him, Lysander's hand rested lightly on his arm. Neither of them spoke. Words were unnecessary. Their resolve, their bond, their shared courage were enough. The air was colder than winter itself. From the far corners of the room, the ancient spirit emerged, its silver mist flowing like smoke through the hallways. Its eyes glimmered with cruel intelligence, and its voice, hollow and timeless, filled the chamber. "You dare face me," it said. "After all these years, you seek to undo what cannot be undone. You cannot control what is older than kings, older than mortals. Do you not fear what I will take?" Falric's jaw tightened. "We fear nothing," he said. "Not you, not your curse, not the shadows you hide behind." Lysandra stepped forward, her dark eyes fixed on the shimmering figure. "You are wrong," she said softly but firmly. "We do not seek to control you. We only ask that you release what is ours, the life of this kingdom and the future we choose together. We face this as one." The spirit's laughter filled the room, a sound like ice breaking on frozen lakes. "You speak boldly, but boldness does not protect you. You cannot withstand what lies ahead. One misstep, and all you love will vanish." The fear he had long buried pressed against him again, but he did not falter. He had faced armies, betrayal, and loss, yet nothing had prepared him for the depth of what he felt now. His heart no longer belonged solely to the crown. It belonged, fully and unwillingly, to the woman beside him. And for her, he would face any darkness. The spirit's form shifted, expanding until it filled the room with cold silver light. The air hummed, and the crystal in the center of the chamber pulsed, responding to the energy that had been building for centuries. Falric reached out and placed his hand on it, feeling the chill burn through him. "Trust me," he whispered to Lysandra. "I do," she replied without hesitation, her hand covering his. The warmth of her touch pushed back the cold that surrounded them. Together, they became the anchor that the palace had never known. Two hearts, two wills, facing an immortal shadow. Its voice trembled slightly, though it tried to mask it with authority. "You cannot break me," it said. "You cannot unbind what has lasted for centuries." Lysandra spoke, her voice clear and unwavering. "It is not about breaking you. It is about choosing what comes next. And we choose life. We choose trust. We choose each other." The crystal flared, blinding in its brilliance. Thalric felt a surge of energy, as though the spirit itself tried to pull him apart, to reach into his heart and claim what it desired. He gritted his teeth and held on to Lysandra's hand, feeling her steady heartbeat through his own. And then, something extraordinary happened. The light of the crystal reflected off their joined hands, forming a bridge of warmth that extended through the room. The spirit shrieked, its silver form twisting, trying to escape the force it could not touch. You cannot resist me," it cried. "We do not resist," Thalric said firmly. "We face you. Together." The room shook, the torches flickering wildly as the spirit's voice grew louder, echoing through the halls of the palace. Yet, in the midst of chaos, Lysandra's courage shone. She stepped closer to the crystal, her gaze locked with the spirit's. "I will not let fear rule me," she said. "And you cannot touch what is built on trust and love." The spirit wailed, a sound that pierced the soul, but the light of the crystal grew brighter still. Thalric and Lysandra felt themselves connected not only to each other, but to the ancient pulse of the palace itself. The blood of kings, the strength of ancestors, the hope of a future yet unwritten. Then, with a final shuddering cry, the spirit dissolved, its silver mist scattering into the air like fine dust. The cold lifted, leaving the throne room warm with the faint glow of the crystal. For the first time in centuries, Arendor was free from the shadow that had haunted its rulers. Thalric sank to his knees, exhausted but alive. Lysandra knelt beside him, her hand resting on his chest. Their breaths mingled, shallow at first, then deepening as they drew strength from each other. "It is over," she whispered. "For now," he said, his voice soft, almost a murmur. "But I fear it may return in another form. And when it does, I will be here," Lysandra said. "Always. We will face it together, as we always have." Thalric lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her fingers, a gesture both royal and intimate, a promise sealed in silence. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to smile. Not a mask of duty, but a true smile, born of relief, admiration, and something deeper he had not expected to feel again. In the days that followed, the palace slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though now it was filled with a new energy, a sense of hope, of trust, of unity. The lords and advisers who had plotted against him were confronted, their schemes undone not with fear, but with wisdom and strategy. Thalric ruled with strength tempered by understanding, and Lysandra became more than a companion. She became his partner in the truest sense. Evenings were spent together in the library, discussing strategy, studying the history of the land, and sometimes simply sharing quiet moments of laughter. The bond that had begun in fear and tension had grown into something strong, beautiful, and unshakable. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in gold and violet, Thalric led Lysandra to the highest balcony of the palace. Below them, the kingdom stretched endlessly, peaceful and silent. "We have done what few could," he said, his voice quiet, filled with wonder. We face shadows that have haunted my family for generations and survived. Lysandra leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. And we will survive whatever comes next, she replied. Not because we are alone, but because we face it together. Thalric smiled, the warmth of the moment washing over him like sunlight after a long winter. You have changed me, Lysandra. You have made me see that even in chaos there is beauty, even in fear there is hope, and even in a crown of shadows there can be love. And you have shown me that even a king can have a heart, even a ruler can feel, and that strength is not just in command, but in trust and care. The crystal from the throne room glimmered faintly in the distance, a reminder of the battle they had faced and won. Though the spirit's shadow had been banished, they both knew that life would always carry challenges. New storms, new betrayals, new threats. But now, they were ready. Together. That night, as snow fell softly outside the palace, Thalric and Lysandra walked through the gardens, their hands intertwined. The moonlight painted their path in silver, the cold air crisp but not harsh. They spoke little, for words were unnecessary. Their presence was enough, their connection enough, to fill the silence with comfort and peace. And in that moment, beneath the quiet of a kingdom finally at rest, both understood the truth. The greatest power in all of Arendor was not the crown, not the armies, not the legacy of kings. It was the bond of two hearts who dared to trust each other, who chose love in the face of shadow, who embraced the chaos and emerged stronger for it. They paused by a fountain, now free of ice, its waters reflecting the stars above. Thalric turned to her, lifting her hand to his lips once more. We have won more than a battle, he said softly. We have found each other, and that is worth more than any kingdom. Lysandra smiled, her eyes shining. Then let us guard it together, she whispered. The wind stirred gently, carrying the soft scent of snow and pine. And somewhere in the quiet corners of the palace, the faintest shimmer of the vanished spirit lingered, not threatening, not dangerous, but a reminder of what had been overcome. It had tested them, but it had not broken them. Thalric pressed his forehead to hers, a gesture of unity, trust, and love. Together, he murmured. Together, Lysandra echoed. Above the palace, the moon shone brightly, and the kingdom slept peacefully, unaware that its rulers had faced shadows older than the mountains themselves, and had emerged, not unscathed, but unbroken and stronger than ever.